Hi, I'm Sue Borison from Your Teen Media, and here we are today with Dr. John Duffy. We're so glad to have you. Tell us what you're doing these days.
Hi, Sue. Okay, so I am a clinical psychologist based here in Chicago, just outside Chicago, working a lot these days with client families and the teenagers that are part of my practice, trying to help kind of guide them through this very odd time. I am the author of a couple of parenting books, including Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. And I've got a couple of podcasts. One is called Better with My Wife, Julie, and the other is called On Purpose with Chicago Tribune columnist Heidi Stevens.
And John, you were on our podcast, and I think we're trying to work out when we can get on one of yours. So that's
We are going
exciting.
to make that happen.
Good, good. Okay, so we're here today to talk about parents of teenagers and how much we're all struggling for an assortment of different reasons. So most of our kids are home. If we're in places where lockdown is being taken really seriously, we are trying to figure out a new norm for our families. And one of the things that you focus on in your book is anxiety, teenagers with
Yes.
anxiety, and how prevalent it is today. So how is the new reality affecting those kids in particular?
So anxiety for a lot of these kids is spiking, as you might guess. It's interesting, Sue, because a lot of the things they're being asked to do, and most of these kids are trying to do their best. So they're maintaining social distance, they're washing their hands, they're using hand sanitizer. They're also watching their Twitter feeds and they're listening to each other on Snapchat. And so they're a little overwhelmed and their anxiety is increasing in part because of the news, but also because some kids are describing the things I normally do in my life, just going to school, hanging out with friends, is now life threatening. Now this is as opposed to being like we're just like getting together socially and hanging out. This is now a scary thing. I don't know where to find the lane for my anxiety. I don't know how alarmed to be. Um, so one young boy in particular was saying, you know what, this feels to me like the early part of a horror film, the first early scenes where something awful's about to happen. I don't know what's going to happen exactly. I don't know how it's going to affect me, and I don't know how bad it's going to be. So I don't know whether to be really anxious or calm or alarmed. I can't find the right lane for my concern and my worry. And he articulated this beautifully. Other kids have expressed similar concerns.
Well, so what is your response to that? Because clearly with the rise of anxiety, even before this moment, you were giving great advice to teenagers and their parents. So what do you
Yeah.
want to tell their parents today? Like, can we impact this?
Yeah, I think the way we approach this as parents is so important with our kids and with ourselves. Because if we come at all of this, we're told this is a crisis, and it is. But if we hold a crisis mentality, we're not going to survive this very well, emotionally. So, and we're not modeling good problem solving and situation management with our kids, because effectively what we're being asked to do is not manage a crisis solely, right? Where we've got people who are in charge of that. We're just told to kind of sit tight and create some distance and some space. And so I think the tone we bring to our parenting is really important. And if we are coming at this from a point of crisis and alarm, none of us do our best decision making in that state. We get cortisol flowing through our veins in a way that is not useful when we're in that state. So I think to create a new temporary normal where things are reasonably calm, and we are doing what we're asked to do, and we have some degree of space and structure and connection in our day, then I think we can make it through this, even if it lasts for quite some time. If we're just in crisis mode, then I'm worried.
Okay, so that's a great point, but you see adults and teenagers for a very long time to help them reduce their anxiety level. At a time when we're going to be on with you for another short amount of minutes, can you give us any like consolidated tips of how do we reduce our own anxiety to model that for our kids?
Yeah. So part of it is taking care of yourself. So as parents, you've got to take care of yourself and modulate your own anxiety. And that means taking some time for yourself during the day. I've encouraged everybody in my office, Sue, to download Calm or Headspace. On the Calm app, LeBron James, of all people, does a very nice job of creating a sense of calm with some of his own meditations. I encourage people to download those and give yourself 10 or 15 minutes a day to just listen and breathe and relax and remind yourself that this too shall pass in one way or another. Getting some exercise for yourself during the day, giving yourself a break from your social media, your Twitter feed, and MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and all the information is really important. Get outside. I went for a run this morning, and there is nothing that feels better than just getting away from it all and feeling like, okay, I'm sweating and this feels normal. This feels like I'm spending some of the anxious energy. And once you do that, you can parent from a calmer place too, because you gain some perspective and you can give your kids the space to express their anxieties, which I think is so important right now. A lot of parents, in my limited experience here, but it's not that limited, are trying to talk their kids out of worrying. But our kids are really well informed, especially by the time they reach the teen years. And their anxiety, I can see, goes up when their parents are minimizing a situation they know is a big deal. So to kind of honor where your kids are and acknowledge, like, yep, these are really difficult times, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how bad this is going to be, and I don't know if we're going to know somebody who's directly affected or not, but we might.
Are there any
That
tools we can encourage? Like, is journaling something that helps kids? And is it ever a good idea to come together as a family and kind of read to each other what their highlights are of their worries?
Absolutely. First of all, I've encouraged all the kids I work with to journal their feelings about this and other things that are going on. There's so many layers to this for kids. So there's the impending losses in the horror film that's unfolding. But there's also, I'm working with kids who are grieving the loss of the lacrosse season or the musical or prom or, graduation. All these markers, just time with their friends in person. Kids are having a really, really difficult time with all of these things. So I think journaling about what's going on in your life and in your mind is really important for these kids. And I worked with this girl yesterday who said something really profound. She said, you know what? I think that's a good idea because I think I'm going to want to remember this. I think this is time that's going to be meaningful to me. And years from now, I'm going to probably want to tell other people like what I did during this time. And maybe it won't all be bad. And she kind of pointed out, like, because my family and I, we're like spending some time like playing some games and joking around. And so as awful as all this is and how much we're missing out on a lot of the things we care about, this is also kind of oddly fun too if we do it right.
That's beautiful. I can't believe she was wise enough to articulate that already, because it's like in the moment right now, it's hard to see the silver lining. But
Yes.
so I'll just fess up that I already messed it up with my kid who was super disappointed about something that wasn't going to happen, and I pointed out that we're all healthy, and that
No,
so
I get it. I get
yeah.
the inclination to do that. And oh, right. I bet that didn't play well on the back end.
So not. So what do we say when our kids are there? It's kind of like there's a rub to it, because we're trying so hard to prioritize ourselves and
Yeah.
say, like, I mean, people are out of jobs, people aren't sure how their businesses are going to survive, but we're all trying to kind of say, thank God we're alive. And when a kid doesn't join in that, what's the right response?
I think you have to modulate your response and their response. So I think part of it is to listen and acknowledge, and it's hard. I mean, so hard for parents to bite their tongues. I'm witnessing this in family sessions in real time where kids are talking about like, well, I'm going to miss out on spring break. And you can see like one mom in particular, she kind of just closed her eyes and looked at me like, Lord, help me, please get through this moment with
Right.
this selfish child. And yet, she did a great job of saying, yeah, that's got to be really, really hard. On the other hand, we are all healthy, and we're taking these precautions that are really necessary in this time that's unprecedented in my lifetime. And we're going to have to keep doing this. And I don't know how long this is going to be, but I think we're all going to get really frustrated and tired of each other at some point here too.
You had mentioned before we went live some things you're hearing kids are doing and parents are doing that are creative in their homes. Can you share some of those things with us?
Yeah, so some of these are initiatives by kids. So I'm working with a couple of college-age boys who are home, and they started this initiative among their friends. These are frat boys who are home and are going to miss spring break, and they are putting together cards and care packages for people in an old folks home, elderly people in this area, which I think is so cool. There is a girl I'm working with who saw online that some people are putting things in their windows that are encouraging. And so she is making these signs, she and her friends, and bringing them to people and asking them, like, hey, if you want to, you can we'll leave it on your porch and you can put it up in your window and encourage people. Somebody was in here this morning who saw that people were putting Christmas lights back up to bring some good cheer to the neighborhood. And they're not sure this initiative is going to be very effective, but they're asking people to do that, and they're going to do that in their home. So kids are, in an admirable way, trying to figure out ways to make lemonade out of a pretty lemony situation, which is pretty neat. And not every kid is there yet. Some kids are feeling really badly for themselves, and I get it. We're early in this process, and I think they'll get there. And boredom and the need to do something is going to take over. And what I noticed in these kids who have this plan for some goodwill is that they're a little less anxious. I think that brings the anxiety level down. And I noticed the kids just like a game plan. They like to have something to do that could make some impact, even if it's not a certainty. If they feel like it can, I think they like that idea.
If we have kids who don't tend toward that, of looking outside of themselves right now, because teenagers can be so self-centered,
Yes.
Do we push them a little bit? Do we feel badly that they don't look like the next door neighbor's kids who's baking and bringing it to the fire department or the hospital?
Right. I think it's okay that this be a process. I worry that families will compare themselves to each other. I saw a family out in their front yard all playing together, playing tag and stuff yesterday, the day before. And I thought how clever and how awesome of these parents to get teenagers out playing, during this time. But I can imagine being across the street looking out and thinking, my kid's downstairs playing Fortnite, I'm doing something wrong. I think it's okay to look at this all as a process. And maybe you and I are just planting a seed in some parents and some kids' minds that, okay, somewhere along the process, we might want to do something that it avails somebody else of some of our goodwill. But that doesn't have to happen this week. Right now, we're just getting acclimated to a new normal. And I think it's okay if it takes a minute, and if there's a little bit of extra Snapchat time or video game time for right now, I think it's important to establish a new normal with some structure pretty soon. But I don't think there's any space for us to be judging ourselves or our kids right this instant. I don't think that's important.
Well, thank you personally. Okay, so you gave some great suggestions for how we can deal with our own anxiety and our kids' anxiety. But if you were to pick your top 3 things that you see when you're in private practice, you see kind of people's shoulders relax a little bit when you make the suggestions, what would they be?
The first one is relax and let your kids relax. So, this doesn't have to be grave every minute of every day. You are allowed to be irreverent. You're allowed to bring humor into it. There was a boy in my office yesterday who was wildly irreverent. And his mom first said, like, that's inappropriate. And then she cracked up and it was great. So the
Can you
first
tell
is
us
like,
what he said?
I cannot. So I sincerely, it was irreverent enough where I am uncomfortable sharing it with you. I wish I could, but I can't do it. I can't bring
Okay.
myself to do
Okay.
it. Um, and the other is, the other two would be take some time apart. Let there be some time where your child is allowed to just be him or herself with their friends on Snapchat or in their room playing a game. It is okay to be apart. And then finally, I think it's okay to create some family time, even if your kids are resistant to it, where you're together, because there is this opportunity to create some in jokes, play some games. And I think that's going to make us more resilient over this very strange period of time. And I think our families are going to need that in ways that we cannot predict as we sit here now.
Thank you so much, Dr. John Duffy. As always, you give us hope and optimism and great tools to work with. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.